it's all about being intentional and thinking through the whole thing logically. And that's, of course, where knowledge helps, because you can only make these decisions if you know how microphones work and all these details that we just talked about. But the more experience you get and the more advice you take from people online or in the real world, the more you know these things. And the key here is to not just take the advice and think that's how you do it. Always think about why they do this. And if someone tells you to do a thing a certain way, ask why, and then they will tell you, and then you can use that knowledge to make your own decisions.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedikt Hein. If you are new to the show, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're already a listener, thank you so much for coming back. I am a mixing engineer. If you're first time listening to this, I'm a mixing engineer. I run a studio called Outback Recordings, and we mix about 250 songs per year, roughly, from bands and labels from all over the world, all kinds of genres under the rock umbrella, I would say. And a lot of these recordings are DIY recordings. So not everything has been tracked perfectly in big studios and with a big budget, which means we have to deal with all kinds of problems all the time, which also means we work with the artists very closely and coach them to get the best possible recordings before they even send it to us. And all of this led eventually to this podcast and this whole resource that we've built here so we can help you make better recordings at your jam space in your home studios. Today's episode is going to be one on vocal recording. We've done a couple vocal recording episodes in the past, but today it's about being intentional with how you record vocals and about all the things you can do to get a better vocal sound. Because you think like with drum kits or guitars or anything else, there's so many options and obviously so many things you can do at the source. And with vocals, people think, well, I just set up a mic and I sing into it and there's not much I can do at the source. But there actually is. It's the room, it's gear you can record through and all kinds of things. And we're going to talk about this on today's episode. And we're going to help you make good decisions there and not ruin your recordings and not painting yourself into a corner when you record vocals. As always, I'm not doing this alone. I'm doing this with my co-host and friend, Malcolm Owen-Flood. Hello, Malcolm. How are you?
Hey, Benny. I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm good, too. I used to be a little sick, feeling way better now. So if you hear me cough a little bit, it's still a little bit there, but it's better. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. Glad you're doing better, man.
Yeah. So, Studio Scene is coming up. Before we get into this episode, I wanted to say, guys and girls, if you're listening and you want to go there, you can still grab last-minute tickets by the time this episode comes out. So if you want to go to studioszene.de, that link will be in the show notes because for non-Germans, it's impossible to spell that correctly, I think. You can still get a ticket. And if you use the code TSRB15, you get 15% off. And we'd love to see you there, meet you there. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, I'm looking so forward to it, man. I'm days away from jumping on a plane to head over to that side of the planet. Little stop in Ireland on my way, and then off to Germany to hang out with you and the team. It's going to be a blast.
Absolutely. It's going to be one, yeah. I want to share one thing with you, Malcolm, and you guys out there. One thing that we're going to do at Studio Scene is we're going to do a lot of things. We're going to do live podcasts, and we're going to be speakers this year as well on the gear stage. We're going to do some presentations there, workshops there. And I'm going to do one with the guys from Elysia, which I don't know if you know Elysia. It's a high-end audio manufacturer from Germany. And they sent me this beautiful thing here. So if you're watching this on YouTube, here you go. This is a beautiful mini 500 series rack with a preamp and a compressor. And I had the time to play around with that a little bit. And I know Elysia, I've known Elysia gear before, I've used it before, but they sent me this and I had some fun with it and it's absolutely fantastic. So this actually has to do with today's episode because this could be a vocal chain that you could record through. Basically, it's a high-end preamp and a great compressor. And if you're intentional about it and you know what you want and what you're doing, having that on the front end before you go into your interface can be a good idea. It can also completely ruin everything if you use it the wrong way, though. So
yeah, you got to know how to use your stuff.
But exactly.
Yeah, they make nice stuff. I love the look of it. I love 500 series gear. Actually, it's like the Pokemon cards of recording studios. You just get those little modules and mix and match them. It's so cool.
Yeah, totally. And Elysia in particular is I'm not getting paid for this, by the way. They just were kind enough to send me this to kind of play around with it a little bit, but. I'm going to do a workshop with them together on stage to talk about like how you can implement analog gear in a modern digital workflow, sort of. And what I love about their gear is that they have super crazy expensive high end stuff, like their mastering compressor, the alpha compressor that is out of it's out of reach for most people in home studios. But they also have gear that is just as high quality, but actually really affordable. And so it's a really unique thing, like their build quality and everything. I just really love them. So if you want to check them out, Elysia is the company, and they make great stuff for all kinds of budgets. Anyway, let's get to this.
Yeah. It's a somewhat anecdotal episode, I feel like.
Yeah, I wanted you to start with that one because you have one prepared there, the story that led to this.
Yeah. So the point I want to make today is that like that old adage of you got to use your ears really does come true. And I feel like it's something that Benny and I should be reminding people more often, because we try and just dish out as much information as we can on this podcast and on YouTube, on our respective channels there. We're educators, right? So we're always trying to educate. And often it's really nice to be able to package education into like individual things you can memorize. Like, for example, maybe you want to try and make sure that you're recording in a room that doesn't have a lot of outside noise coming in. So if you can hear every bus that goes past your house where you're recording your vocal, maybe you don't want that. So you automatically go to a room on the other side of the house, close the door there, can't hear the bus anymore. Perfect. Let's record vocals. But what if that room is like an empty bathroom and it just sounds like an echo chamber? Like that's kind of where the problems start coming up. By following one rule, you might ignore so many other rules that you either don't know or you're just focusing on one. And this does happen. I do have a band that I recorded where they wanted to handle their own vocal production, which was like honestly my favorite setup, was producing and working with a band that was going to self-produce and record their vocals, because then they could spend as much time as they want on it. Vogue Villains, this isn't you if you're listening. I know you guys listen. You guys nailed it. Your vocal setup was great. Different band, and I won't throw them under the bus, which is fine. They didn't end up screwing this up, but they almost did. And it was this kind of setup of where they wanted to record their vocals, so they got really focused about certain things, and then they chose a room, and thankfully they sent me a test recording before they recorded their whole album. And it was like, oh, this sounds awful, guys. What's going on here? So we ended up having to experiment, try recording in this hallway, try recording in this other room, just try moving around the room. They only had the one mic to work with, the one preamp. So it was really just, where are we going to put it? What can we bring into that environment to treat it? And we ended up going from what would have been a totally unusable vocal that I wouldn't have mixed to something that I could mix with essentially just moving the microphone. But the first place they chose was the theoretically correct place. Mm-hmm. And the place we landed was this doesn't make any sense. I think we ended up in a hallway with openings to other rooms and stuff like that, where they had gone into a bedroom where there was a mattress and stuff like that. But it was just had the worst flutter echo I've ever heard in my life. So the rules don't come ahead of what you actually hear when you record it. That's really the story, is you have to still, even though you followed all of these things you've learned, actually listen to it and then make a decision. The rules, quotation mark rules, that we learn through education resources and through experience, because sometimes those rules work perfectly, are really just going to help you make decisions quicker. And that's what you'll see when you go into a studio and work with a pro. They're going to be really quick at making decisions. They're going to grab a microphone seemingly without any thought and throw it up for a certain job because they've done that before and they know that this should work. But you still have to listen to everything and make sure it works in this specific situation.
Yeah, 100%. And what goes on in my head, for example, when I have to make these decisions, it's like all these micro decisions at the same time that lead to the final decision. So when I think about where to set up a mic, I think about, like you said, outside noise, but at the same time, what does the room sound like? And that there's things like early reflections, flutter echoes, a long room decay that might or might not be cool. The frequency response of a certain spot in the room, the corner can be boomy, somewhere else it can be thinner. Like all these things go on at the same time, but if it's, for example, my room, I can still make a decision really quickly because I've tried all these different spots and know exactly where it sounds a certain way. And if I'm in a new room, I have to spend a little time to get to know that and learn it, or ask the staff there or people there. But it's like all these decisions and not just one. And sometimes people do what you said. They see the device in a YouTube video that might be totally correct, but it's only a small piece of that whole puzzle. And they think, okay, this person said this, we should do this. And that's the only decision they make, ignoring all of the other stuff that might or might not be more important. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, totally. I had a similar thing too, where it didn't end up like we caught it before it happened. But when I work with people in our coaching program, and they wonder where to set up a mic, for example, they sometimes send me videos of their room walking around, talking into a mic and trying different spots, or they just send me the dimensions of the room or pictures or all of the above. And this is always really helpful because then I can at least make an educated guess of what I would start with or what I would do, and then try and compare a few things. So this is always really valuable for people. And one of our students from Finland, he went to... and I can even say the name is Sammy, if I'm talking about here. You're great. And he's making a really cool heavy record, modern metal record. And he went to a cabin somewhere. Of course, he's in Finland. Like, of course, he goes to a cabin in the woods or whatever, but like to make a heavy record. But yeah, he went to a cabin somewhere to record vocals. And then he was wondering which of the rooms he should use for that. And in his video, I could tell that he was going through some of these decisions and some of these thoughts. And so he said, like, he was filming a kitchen, for example, and was like, well, this room would be the smallest, so maybe that would be good. But then I immediately saw that I agree. It was a small, controlled room. You wouldn't have a lot of, like, echo or reverb. But I also immediately saw that it was completely untreated, blank walls. And, like, I knew that, yes, it's small, but it's probably not going to sound really good. It's, like, almost like a small bathroom sort of sound probably in there. Then he had a pretty big main room, which he immediately completely ruled out. And I was like, well, that could actually sound good because it has high ceilings. There's lots of stuff in there, bookshelves, sofas, whatever. Like, it's big, but who knows? Maybe this actually sounds good. And then there was a room upstairs that was smaller with the lower ceiling and seems to be the best of both worlds, sort of. But the ceiling was a little close, though, and it was also pretty untreated. And so, yeah, I saw these and was like, man, this could go, we could try so many things there, and all of these have like pros and cons to them. And so we ended up using the above one, the kind of medium-sized room. The ceiling was kind of close, but it didn't turn out to be a problem. We built a kind of a little bit of a fort around the mic, some mattresses, some pillows and stuff that was lying around in this cabin, and we created like this pretty cool dead spot up there in a room that was still big enough, though, to not sound like a shitty vocal booth. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, when I saw that, it was immediately clear to me what I would do and why. But of course, if someone inexperienced goes into that, they might think that maybe the small kitchen is the ideal place because it's the smallest and I don't want any room in there. And so they default to that, not knowing that they get all kinds of problems from the reflections of the close walls, things like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many instances. Another common example with vocals, I feel like, could just be like microphone choice. There's so many so many people recommend the SM7B on everything. It's just like the best bang for buck microphone, and it really is.
Yeah,
it's just great. But I would say that in my time working in like commercial studios, which I did a lot of, that was like my least chosen vocal microphone because I had a collection of microphones to choose. It's like, yes, this is such an amazing versatile microphone, but if I have all these options, I'm probably going to be able to choose one for that vocalist that I'm going to like more.
Yeah, and also you didn't have the very problematic rooms, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you can use a condenser because you don't have to be worried about the crappy room that it's going to pick up.
Exactly that. It's like the main problem that microphone solves wasn't an issue for me. So if it's not an issue for you, maybe you should try your other mics and see what you actually think about how your voice sounds. Not just go to it because everybody tells you that's the one you should use.
Very good point. Yeah. There's always pros and cons to everything. And the other way around too, maybe you heard that using a condenser mic gives you the most detailed, airy, shiny pop vocal sound. And yes, that's generally true. But if the other way around, if your room is just not usable and you're going to pick up all kinds of problems from the room, you might still be better off using a more lo-fi sounding mic and then treating it differently in the mix compared to using the high-end mic that is going to just capture a very shiny, bright, expensive version of the crappy room. And so, like these things, or maybe the mic is awesome and the room's awesome, but it's just not a good match for your voice. Maybe your S's and the sibilance of your voice is exactly where this mic has like a top end boost and it's just too much and too sibilant, and then you run into that kind of problem. So you got to find what's right for your voice and be intentional with it. And just because you hear a piece of advice that is oftentimes true, it doesn't mean that it 100% applies to your situation and every single time.
Yeah, exactly. It's always got to listen. Always got to listen.
Yeah, totally. So another thing, you mentioned it before we started this episode, could be like recording into certain pieces of gear, right? You could hear two different people say that, like one person could say like, always record dry and don't do anything because you don't want to commit to something that causes problems later. And another person might say like, be bold, record with compression and EQ and like get a sound, commit to a sound and do that because you don't want to record like boring generic stuff. And both are right. Both can work. But like, if you don't know how to operate the compressor and the EQ, maybe you're better off recording both the dry and the processed version, or just not doing it and figuring it out in the DAW. Or if you know exactly what you're doing, maybe it is better to capture a more exciting sound and not save that decision for later. So both can be true. So what could be potential scenarios where this could go wrong if someone decides to record with a compressor, for example, because he or she hears someone say you should do that?
I mean, a really popular compressor is the UAD, or just UA, I should say, 1176, which is tube 1176 compressor. It's awesome. It's like it's
not sorry to interrupt, but it's not tube.
Not tube?
Nope.
What?
It's an FET.
Okay, am I thinking of
the 1176 is an FET compressor. It's not a tube thing.
Hold on.
Yep.
I've seen a tube. Am I thinking of their LA2A?
That has tubes in it, but the 1176 is not a tube compressor.
We're both just like Googling rapidly, looking for pictures here.
Yeah, I'm trying to like. I would be very surprised if I'm wrong here, but like, it has transformers in it, and it is a FET compressor, but it doesn't have tubes.
Then we must be talking about the LA. It is the LA2A because it's built in with the preamp. Oh, but they have that as well as with the 76 as well, don't they? There's both versions.
Yeah, but the compressor, the 1176, never had tubes. It's like not a tube thing.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. the LA2A UA strip. What is that piece of gear called?
I mean the channel strip with the preamp?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know now what you mean. Okay, that one has an 1176 built into it, and it's a tube thing. You probably mean that. Yep, that makes sense. I'm just looking up what you mean. I know what you mean, but like
LA610 is what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yep. Totally. That's you're
totally
absolutely right.
Not an 1176.
Yep.
There's a tube though, essentially.
Yeah, and it has an 1176 style compressor built into it, so you're right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
It took us a while to get there, but we got there, folks.
Yeah.
So, but the moral of the story is it actually doesn't matter what piece of gear it is that there's a tube, and tubes we're taught to believe are amazing, which generally they are fun, but they can also go.
Sorry to interrupt again, Malcolm, but like it's again wrong. There is another one with the 1176 in there. This one is tube, but has an opto in it, the LA610. I just want to be correct here. Like LA610 is a tube preamp and an opto compressor in it. And then there is the 6176, I think it's called. And that one has the 76, the 1176 style compressor in it.
But no tube in that one.
No tube.
Probably in the preamp.
Yeah, it is a tube preamp. So that's the one with tube preamp and 1176. And the other one that you mentioned is an opto compressor and a tube preamp. So pick your combination of preamps and compressors. I bet what you wanted to say though is true for all of them. So
yes, though the point is that tubes are like just like we gravitate to tubes because they're revered in the audio world, but they also go bad very frequently, and they can develop all sorts of weird buzzes and like harmonic stuff. They can start picking up radio frequencies. Things can get really weird quickly. So if you just grab one on rental for a recording and just assume, well, because I've got this, it's going to be better, you could be terribly mistaken and end up with like just the oddest sounding recording ever. And actually, that's not even just tubes. Like Gefell is a microphone brand that you'll know, Benny.
Yeah.
Really nice mics. Really nice. You don't see them over in North America as much, but they are great. But we had some vintage Gefells at the woodshop recording studio where I worked, and we would hear the weirdest radio channels. They were in like a different language. I don't know where they were coming from. So like we couldn't use them on quiet sources because there would be like some creepy foreign sounding language in your recording of your like beautiful acoustic guitar. It's like that's not going to fly. But technically one of the nicest microphones in the cabinet. So these are just like more examples of where things can go wrong. I mean, if we really want to be harsh, the amount of times that people have rented these UA channel strips, because they're like the go-to rental from the music stores around here, and sent me the photos of their settings, and that the compressor's in bypass. They don't even realize it's not doing anything. That's another example of you got to use your ears.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. And and then the more you add to the recording chain, like these things add up. So maybe, so let's say you have a problematic room and you didn't really hear it when you recorded dry, but then you compressed it on the way in, you compressed it heavily,
Yes.
then all of a sudden this room comes up a lot. And now you have a combination of the room. Maybe you didn't get the compression right. So now maybe you have a weird compression or too much of it, plus the problematic room. It's just one more decision that is happening here where like, okay, the room is not problematic as long we don't smash the vocal. So maybe we need to do more automation instead of compressing it hard. Like everything affects everything. That's what I mean. So every time you add something, it gets more complex, and you need to keep all these things in mind. And for an experienced engineer, it's pretty easy because like that's just the thing that's ongoing in our brains and we know all of that. But for a beginner, it can be super hard to stay on top of all of that and realize how the compressor now changes how the room sounds, and what the EQ that did to the sibilance, and whether or not it matters to EQ into the compressor or afterwards, and like all these different decisions there. And so I would say learn one thing at a time. Like find the perfect spot first for your vocal mic. Play around with the angle of the mic and all that. There's a lot you can do there actually, and people don't even realize. Then once you nail that and you want to try compressing on the way in, learn the compressor that you have and see how far you can push it, see what happens to the other, like the room and the sibilance and all of that. And then once you have that, see if you can EQ it, see if it makes sense to EQ it into the compressor afterwards. But like do one step at a time, because the worst thing that can happen is, I think, when people do everything at once, and it's clear that something's gonna just slip through the cracks. It's similar to when people try to dial in. We're going to stay with vocals here, but just a little side thing here. When people try to get a good guitar tone with an amp sim and they start with a preset, sometimes that is a good idea, but also it makes it so hard to troubleshoot and also so hard to learn it really and be intentional, because if you start with an entire chain of things that consists of pedals and amps and cabs and mics and whatnot, and it doesn't work, like where do you start? What's the problem, right? You didn't put one at a time in place. You just started with this massive thing, and you don't even know where the problems are coming from. And the same is true here. If you start, if you haven't found a good spot to record the vocals yet, but you're already slamming it into a compressor and then you're EQing the shit out of it, and then the vocal sounds weird, like where do you start? Is it the mic position? Is it the angle? Is it the room? Is it the compression? Is it the EQ? Is it the order of things? Like, do one thing at a time, I think, because the more stuff you add, the difficult it will be to identify the problem and solve it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it does kind of apply to everything. But yeah, sticking with vocals. I mean, most of our listeners have this huge advantage with vocals where they probably can leave their vocal setup set up because they're really probably just recording themselves, right? It's for their own voice. So once you dial it in, you're pretty set, which is awesome. It's different if you have to kind of change it for different singers all the time, or have a studio where you've got just 100 different situations happening all the time. But even then, you can start learning things. But even when you've got it dialed in, you still have to check because things break, things change. What worked on one song doesn't always work on another song.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's talk through a few. Let's give people a few actionable things and tips when it comes to vocal recording that come to mind here. So, one would be, and it goes against some of the advice that's out there, but I firmly believe it. And I've talked to many acousticians who say exactly the same, and also a lot of recording engineers, and it makes sense to me. So, for example, a lot of the times when you have a problematic room, people say use a mic screen. These things like behind the mic. These very popular things you see all the time. And there's a place for those. And sometimes if the room is super problematic and you just do what you can do and you try to avoid room, but you do whatever you can do to avoid room in the microphone. But if it's not a super crazy room, it's usually way better to have the absorber behind you and not behind the mic. So what if you tried and put a mattress up against the wall, stand in front of that mattress, have the mic point at you and this mattress, so you get rid of the early reflections. So all the mic is seeing, quote unquote, is you, the direct sound, and then there's nothing coming back from the wall behind you because there's this huge mattress. And then you're singing into the room, so the less sensitive side of the mic is pointing towards the room. It's picking up less of the reflections. And you don't add this extra layer of early reflections around the mic, which is this mic screen, which would also cause problems. So sometimes this is the solution. You have the It's the similar thought process when you look at control rooms. The absorbers are behind the speakers typically, and so behind the source of the sound. In this case, you are the source of the sound. If you have the absorbers behind you, it will be a more direct and clear representation of the sound because it doesn't have the early reflections that arrive at the mic at the same time as your voice. And so if you do that and sing into the room, your problem might be solved. And I see a lot of people do the opposite. They will sing into an open closet or have the mic screen, and behind them is this big open room where the mic is pointing at. And so it's just sometimes you see a piece of advice that might not be wrong, but it's still not the right solution for this situation. And of course, if you have to record in a big hall or something really problematic and you need to do all the things you can do to get rid of that as much as possible, then use a mic screen. Try and see if it makes things better, but it might make things worse, and it might not be the ideal solution.
Yeah. That's actually a great one. I hate those things.
Yeah, they often cause problems. They cause more reflections than they solve sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
Completely unrelated, Malcolm. I don't know if you've noticed, if you're watching this on YouTube now and you're wondering what the hell is going on, I just said all this while not looking into the camera, but looking at the speaker above the camera, and I have no idea why. So I just was staring a couple of inches above the camera as if that was the camera until I realized. So if you're wondering why I was staring
into space,
into space, that was why.
You got nice speakers, man. I get it. Actually, I have no idea what you're using for speakers now.
The same ones that I've been using for the past 12 years. It's the Adams A77X, their midfield monitors.
Yeah. Well, you have the Callies now as well, right, though?
Yeah, in the B room, yes.
In the B room, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Sorry, back to our topic, listeners. Yeah, that is a prime example of just that one's kind of interesting because the advice that those are good is, I think, just generally poor advice. They are creating really close reflections to your microphone. And even if you're going to use one, pull it back away from your microphone a little bit. Just create some distance. Maybe where they work, I was thinking about this as you were talking, is spoken word because it's less amplitude. Maybe. I don't know. Probably then still.
I've abused them for all kinds of things. What I had success with is I used them to isolate, I put them over the hi-hats in a very weird spot so that I had less hi-hats at my overheads. So when I had crazy loud hi-hats in the overhead image, I just found a way to put this over the hi-hats so that there's less of that in the overheads. That helped to a degree because it filtered out some of the top end.
Yep, that's a cool use case for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what's another one? Another big vocal misconception.
Doesn't have to be a misconception though. Like just vocal advice. I don't know how. Like I have a question for you, Malcolm. Do you play around with angles of mics a lot, or do you have your go-to ways to position a microphone? Or is it always straight into it for you, or is it slightly angled, slightly from above or below, or like what are your thoughts there?
I've been straight on with vocals, but I've definitely done the like above kind of angled down at them. This makes more sense if you're watching the video right now, I think, and you've probably seen old school photos of like a mic on a giant stand up above the talent. And I have had luck with that. I generally don't go there unless the first thing doesn't work though, which is kind of on topic with this whole episode actually, is like, do the normal thing. It's not working. Let's try this. And their advantages of going up there, if we're curious, are that some people do resonate very differently out of their face, out of their vocal mask, as it would be called. You also avoid the airflow probably entirely. Probably don't even need a pop filter of any kind if you've got it there. Some people tilt their head a little when they sing as well, so it's like maybe you're actually ending up in a better spot. And then there's of course the old tube mythology of that if you've got a tube mic and you place it upside down, the heat is going in a different direction there, and your tube is going to be happier. I have no idea if that's true or not.
Yeah, it apparently affects the capsule and how it works and whatnot with the heat. Yeah, but you're right. Like that would be my I start straight on, but like I that would be my next position that I would try. And I would add another reason for why that could be a good solution up there and angled down is because of the S's. You said the airflow, which is basically that too. So it's not just plosives, but the sibilants. If you make an S noise, you feel like the air is like, you feel it on your lower lip. So for most people, the S's go like they're somewhere at the top of your mouth. You make the S, but then the air goes down right there. And so if the mic is above that, it's less sibilant typically. The worst in terms of sibilants and plosives is pretty much where you have the mic right now, Malcolm, which is like down there. Yep, exactly.
I've been trying to talk here. Again, this makes more sense if you're talking to watching the video, but the mic is actually not right in front of me. It's
and that helps.
To the side a little bit.
Yeah, and that helps too. It's the same principle. Yeah, and if you have it up there, that can help too. But then there's other things that I always add to this when I do that. I tell the talent, for example, to not like look like up like this and sing up into the mic, but they should still sing straight ahead and just ignore that the mic's up there. Like that's the whole point. Like don't do the Lemmy thing and just sing up there.
Yeah.
But like but it's all about being intentional and thinking through the whole thing logically. And that's, of course, where knowledge helps, because you can only make these decisions if you know how microphones work and all these details that we just talked about. But the more experience you get and the more advice you take from people online or in the real world, the more you know these things. And the key here is to not just take the advice and think that's how you do it. Always think about why they do this. And if someone tells you to do a thing a certain way, ask why, and then they will tell you, and then you can use that knowledge to make your own decisions. So that's really the key here. You need to be able to do all of that intentionally. And so instead of just copying what someone else does, ask yourself why they are doing this in this scenario, and try to dissect it and see all the reasons behind it, basically. And then you can use parts of it or the entire thing whenever it works. But that's really it. And yeah, so mic angle, there's a lot you can do. Sibilants, you can avoid that. You can avoid plosives. Certain people definitely sound different with different mic angles, or like everyone sounds different. It can be, some people even don't sing like straight in front of them, like into the mic. Some people do this like to the side thing, where
side of the mouth thing.
They talk. When they talk, it's normal, and then when they sing, they start doing something different with their mouth, and they sing to the side. Like, just pay attention to those things, and then apply whatever you need to apply.
It's again, just you got to listen. The last little fun example I think we could give just to end this off is it's so obvious, but everybody misses it. But everybody's seen a pop filter be placed in front of the mic they're singing into, so we all do that, which is good. We all should be. It does help a lot. But a pop filter loses like 90% of its effectiveness if it is up against the capsule of your microphone. It requires space to actually do its job. So people throw it in front, place it right on the microphone, which the microphone I'm talking into, again, if you're watching, has one built into it. And it is right on top of the capsule. It does very little. It's this tiny little piece of foam. The metal grill is essentially one as well. But they're so close to the microphone that that's why you're still getting a kind of noise out of me for sure. If I had a pop filter here a couple inches away, that would be effectively solved. But then we do video and it looks dumb.
Yeah.
You can't see my face.
Yeah.
So we don't have that on the podcast. But for recording a vocal where that's not important, you can have a pop filter, but you just got to back it off a little bit, create space. And that makes a world of difference in the effectiveness of it. So it's one of those like, oh, I need a pop filter. But there's more than that. You still have to listen. Are the plosives still there? If they're still there, we have to do something about it because we haven't actually solved anything. We've just thrown something in the way of our microphone.
Absolutely. I always think about that when I see these mic kits where you can buy a cheap condenser mic with like the shock mount and then a tiny pop filter directly on the shock mount that is right there. And I was like, I don't know, like that's not the way to do it. But
it's just not the way to do it. I mean, it does do something. It just doesn't do enough.
Yeah, totally. Don't you have a video? I might be wrong, but don't you have a video on your YouTube channel on like pop filters and comparisons? And like I remember seeing pretty interesting stuff there. It was a while ago, but
pretty fun, man. I essentially did a test with a microphone and a pop filter and then a hair dryer, seeing like how much of a difference it would make. So we're blowing a lot of air at this microphone, and it was wild how much of a difference it make. And I even like unscrewed this one and experimented with the distance in that. It makes a huge difference. It made a bigger difference than I thought it would have.
Cool. This is also on your Malcolm Owen-Flood YouTube channel? Just
just look me up on YouTube at Malcolm Owen-Flood. You'll find it. Pop filter.
Perfect. Yeah, these videos are fun. I remember watching that and being like, wow, that was more than I thought. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
So, moral of the story, you got to use your ears. It's great to be learning things, and like I like to compartmentalize them into like, little tools and tricks that I can memorize. That's a great function for me, but it's all for naught if I don't then apply my ears and my logic behind it as well for why I'm doing it and what does it actually sound like.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you want to have someone that you can actually ask the why, if you would you want to see these things applied and then ask why to do it in a certain situation or why not to do it. If you want someone to look at your room, find the perfect mic position for.
I like that a lot, Benny.
Yeah,
the Michael.
Yeah,
the abbreviated mic angle.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about vocal and said mic, and then Michael came out. Anyway, but like, so if you want me to look at or someone to look at your, mic angle and for your vocal, and find the right spot there and the room and all that. Please feel free to apply to our coaching program, the Self-Recording Syndicate. If you go to the selfrecordingband.com, there's a little apply button, and that takes you to a questionnaire, and that gives me an idea of whether or not this could be a good fit for you. And if it is, we'll jump on a free first call. No strings attached. We just talk through your situation, see where you are right now, where you want to go, and whether or not we can help you. And if it turns out to be a great fit for both of us, you can join the syndicate, and then I will work with you. Me and my team, actually, we will work with you one-on-one and inside this community on your recordings, on your mixes, whatever the problem is that you're trying to solve. And then you get the hands-on feedback, the advice, and you get to ask all the questions and learn all the whys behind all the decisions. So if that sounds interesting to you, the selfrecordingband.com.
Check it out.
See you next week. Thank you for listening.
All right. See you in the next one.